Mr. Ganapathy, congratulations on your book, Whispers in the Shadows. As a former bureaucrat with an illustrious career, also as the former chief of the NSG, one would actually wonder why is it called Whispers in the Shadows and not Whispers in the Corridors?
First of all, thank you for having me. Uh, I wanted it to be a little different.
What
Whispers,
makes it so unique?
uh, well, I hope the readers will find out for themselves. But as for the title, Whispers in the Shadows, it gives an imagery of something a little mysterious. So the book is a little offbeat in the sense that they're mostly from the snatches of my personal life, professional life, intertwined with the sort of paranormal intervention in the end. So whispers in the corridors would have been too sort of pedantic or bureaucratic. So my publisher thought whispers in the shadows would be a sort of appropriate tagline for the book.
Oh, absolutely. And what is gripping my attention right now is that it's inspired by chilling events. I want to know what chilling events are we talking about?
See, while the cover highlights the paranormal aspect of the book, in reality it's a collection of stories, some from my personal life, which mostly are situated in a place called Coog, where I was born and
Right.
spent my childhood, and the rest of the stories are about my policing career mostly, and mostly about cases which I have investigated or I have had the chance to know from of colleagues, etc. So, but it's a little different in the sense they are not typical investigations. They are very, routine police investigations. But the end, there is a twist of events, and quite often the victim gets justice through a paranormal intervention. The idea behind this book largely is to showcase the fact that we police officers quite often forget our primary sort of role in society, which is to keep the victim of a crime at center stage always and keep ourselves in the background. So most of the stories showcase the victim in a particular investigation and how, in spite of quite often the best efforts of the police, due to certain systemic problems, they do not always get justice, in a total sense of the term. So that's where the paranormal twists come in my stories, and many of the offenders get comeuppance through some interventions.
It's interesting how you focused on the travesty of justice by
Yeah.
also focusing on the victims. But having said that, since we are talking about chilling events, could you share one of the most chilling or spooky events that you encountered in real life?
See, that I'll leave it to that'll be a spoiler if you in real life, as in my own
One
personal
episode,
life.
perhaps.
See, if you really read the stories, you'll realize that these stories are mostly borrowed from certain belief systems, certain, every place in India has some mystery, especially it's more so in small towns and cities. Most of my life, most of my career, I served in quite often in small towns. So each town had a share of its own mystery. So I used to very keenly follow the local folklore and stuff like that. And much of the paranormal part of my stories are borrowed from those belief systems, sometimes folklore, sometimes, what I heard from my subordinates. So I won't really reveal which are the most
Right.
chilling, etc.
But one incident which would perhaps also rouse the reader's curiosity to explore more in the
Okay,
book.
okay. So I can expand a little more perhaps. There was a particular district. This is not purely paranormal, but I found it very odd.
Okay.
So there was a particular district in UP where I served. It was not too far away from the capital, Lucknow.
What
But
is the name of the
no, I
district?
won't. So
Okay.
that's the thing. See, I have to camouflage names, events,
Sure.
places, etc., so that identities are protected. So there was a murder in a particular police station limit. It was a very remote police station, almost on the borders. It's a really remote area. So as a superintendent of police, you are expected to go inspect scenes of crime, etc. So when we got the information that a murder has been committed, we went to that particular village. So I found it very odd that as soon as we entered the village, the entire village sort of disappeared. Everybody in the village disappeared, and how some are on, some mostly on horsebacks. So, I mean, it's not your normal horse which you find in race courses, etc. Really rustic, horses which, rough men use. And the people are also rather, the village was really in a primitive state of existence. So, by the time we reached the village and sort of entered into it, there was nobody. No women, no men, no children.
Were they expecting you to arrive?
No, perhaps they must have thought it's some police vehicle, or maybe quite often, I mean, it's surprising how many villages are totally cut off from civilization.
Yes.
I'm talking about the 90s.
Right.
Now that may not be the case. But those days, even strangers entering a village, sort of, in some places, evoked a sense of fear or insecurity or strangeness in them. So I found it very odd that, you go investigate a murder case and then you find that, there's absolutely nobody who is able to tell you anything about who is this person who is dead, how did he die, and what could be the possibilities. So based on that story, I have, based on that reality, there is a story in my book which sort of highlights, the entire village disappearing, and the next day when we go there, we are unable to find it. Even the buildings,
True.
etc., had disappeared.
And it is indeed going to be challenging to solve such cases,
Yeah.
which is why I think, if not from a legal point of view, but more from an investigative point of view, I want to ask you, what are admissible evidences, especially when it comes to these paranormal cases, which of course have been extremely rare in the court of law?
See, uh, I have to clarify that the stories, the investigations are not actually about paranormal events; they are normal investigations. So, in my stories, when we fail as a police force or profession, see what happens in any investigation is, every investigation is unique, but there are some cases which are very particularly hard to investigate, like a blind murder case where the accused are not known,
Right.
or even atrocities against women which happens in a random way. People are not known.
So, how, as investigators, do you, in the first place,
Yeah.
deduce that it's a paranormal or a supernatural case that you are investigating?
So that's what I'm saying. So you go about an investigation in a normal sense. So you try to collect evidence, you get witnesses' statements, you use forensics, you do your best. But at some point, you do know that, in spite of your best efforts, maybe this case cannot stand the test in a court of law because of certain inherent problems in the criminal justice system. Maybe the witnesses will turn hostile. Maybe the forensic evidence which we collected could not pass through a chain of custody, which is a requirement in law. Sometimes it becomes difficult due to passage of time. So, in the stories, it's a normal investigation.
Okay.
But the protagonist, Avinash, he is a very diligent police officer. He does his investigation in a very professional manner. But in spite of all this, he has this gut feeling that, this case, will be very difficult to prove finally, and victim sort of getting justice out of it. So then in the story, the paranormal twist comes in. So I leave it to the imagination of the reader actually to believe in those events or not. But the idea is to showcase that, police investigations is challenging.
Yes.
Sometimes you do your best and still, the accused may go free. And it's not always due to incompetence, but also due to certain inherent limitations within our system, and also due to passage of time when, evidences get lost, etc.
That's why I often wonder, how possible is it to ensure that justice is rendered in such incidents? Because what if the murderer claims in court that he was under demonic possession? And can you ensure justice in such cases?
So that there is a provision in law which deals with all this. There's something in the IPC, in the old IPC,
Okay.
called general exceptions, where accused can legitimately claim that it was a bona fide act on his part, and he cannot be held he cannot be held guilty for that. So demonic possession is not one of them. So legally nobody can claim that I was under demonic possession and so I committed this crime. Maybe the court can order a psychiatric evaluation, and maybe if it finds certain mitigating factors, maybe there can be leniency. But that's not a defense in a criminal trial.
All right.
So, as I said, the challenge is that even after you do your best to prove a case in a court of law, there are instances when the entire system sort of, especially if an offender is powerful, resourceful, he can um, he can sort of engage the best legal brains. So there is a possibility that the accused can get away. So in my stories, when such a thing happens, there is a sort of paranormal intervention, and the victim, in a sense, gets justice, and the offender gets a suitable kind of comeuppance.
So, are you saying that in your stories, the
Yeah.
paranormal force has also arrived as this messiah for justice?
Exactly. So it's see. This is the book is a work of fiction.
Yes.
So it's not pure fiction in the sense that the investigations mentioned in my stories are largely borrowed from real life
Okay.
investigations, but the paranormal twists I sort of, as I said, borrowed it from various belief systems, from places where I worked in, places where I was born and brought up. Every place has a folklore, as I said. So some of those imageries I have superimposed on actual investigations and sort of created a work where it's a combination of fact and fiction.
So, your book indeed is very, unconventional, especially coming from a senior former bureaucrat such as you. That's why I want to ask, what sparked your interest in this genre?
See, I was always interested in reading books. So, I mean, that's one of my favorite pastimes right from a young age. So, I personally believed I had a flair for writing, but I don't know what others feel. So I thought that I can't write my memoirs, etc. There are civil servants dime a dozen who come and write memoirs and nobody reads them, and it's mostly about self glorification and stuff. So I thought it should be a literary work with a difference in the sense it should not be about me, but I have a sort of strong belief that, as I said earlier, that quite often people who should be the center stage of our work, the victims, rarely get a sort of
A voice.
mention anywhere, a voice anywhere, agency anywhere. So, in most of the stories, the victims come out strongly in my stories. So, that was the idea. So that, whoever who reads the book gets a feeling that it's not the police officer who is important in any crime. It's not the investigator or the police or the law or anybody, but the victim. And if the victim doesn't get justice for whatever reason, it's a failure on our part. And also, that failure is always, as I said, not due to incompetence, but also sometimes circumstances beyond one's control. So, at the same time, the stories depict that one should do one's professional job very thoroughly, because these are not very complex investigations. They're simple cases investigated in a very professional way, and in spite of that, at times, you don't get the desired results.
Many book reviews have talked about how your writing style is reminiscent of that of Ruskin Bond's. I want to ask you, have there been any writers from the horror genre who have inspired you, like Shirley Jackson or even Edgar Allan Poe?
See, as I said, right in the cover, Mr. Ruskin Bond has given a reference to my book. So I always liked his stories, not just this genre, the mystery genre, but most of his works, because they are set in very, mostly in small places, simple stories, said in a very lucid way, and at times, twists which one cannot imagine. So he has been an inspiration definitely for this particular work. But I've also been inspired by many of these, shikar writers, writers of shikar tales like Jim Corbett. There was a very famous shikar author in South India. His name was Kenneth Anderson. So he also used a sort of genre where he used to tell shikar tales with also a sprinkling of tales about the paranormal, etc. So I used to avidly read such works. But apart from these works, I've also been inspired by most of the other, classical writers like Charles Dickens, even the Russian writers like Tolstoy, etc. So I thought that, I've read so many books, so I should sort of try to write something and hope that people would have a read and like it.
Many critics believe that as a genre, it's more challenging than even comedy. Do you agree? And what do you think is so challenging about this genre?
Definitely, I think this genre is easy. For example, I think the best writer of humor is P.G. Wodehouse. P.G. Wodehouse is a master of humor, and I don't think anybody can write like him. So it's a far more difficult art to make people laugh, and I think far easier to make people scared or cry and stuff
No,
like
but
that.
many believe that it is more challenging than comedy.
Really, I don't think so. I don't think so. I think it's
Okay.
far easier to make people sort of easier to make people scared and very difficult to make people laugh.
Laugh.
Yeah.
All right. On that note, do you also watch movies from the horror genre? Are you
I
fond
rarely
of
do.
paranormal?
I rarely do. But not horror as in outright horror. Even this book is not a out and out horror sort of genre. It's more like far more nuanced and subtle. But I do like mysteries, especially murder mysteries, detective stories, etc. Those are my staple after retirement because I have a lot of time now. So whenever I get free time, I do watch these. But I have a fairly eclectic taste in both books and movies otherwise.
All right. I just want to play a quick rapid fire round with you.
Sure.
What comes to mind when I say certain words? Bhoot Bangla.
No, I'm not scared.
Spirit.
Spirit may exist, may not exist.
Death.
Is a reality.
All right. On that note, I also want to ask you, what is the most horrifying thought that you've experienced?
A horrifying thought is maybe perhaps that you're all alone you are alone in this world and there's nobody sort of with whom you can talk, communicate, have empathy, etc. Loneliness. Loneliness would be, a short word is
How do you
loneliness.
define fear?
Fear is mostly very difficult to define fear, but fear is good. Fear motivates you to overcome obstacles in life. So a man who does not have fear would be very abnormal because fear is what ultimately goads you to overcome challenges and sort of plan for things and stuff like that. But physical fear, I don't really feel that kind of physical fear, elemental fear. Not from wild animals, not from criminals or anybody.
Do you believe in after death experiences?
See, if I give that away, then people won't read my book. So I'll reserve that judgment.
All right. So, are you telling me that you've also had that encounter in the investigations you carried out?
No, not really. Not really.
But do you believe in after death experiences?
See, I also, as I said, watch some of these stories on YouTube and stuff like that. So sometimes it makes me wonder at times. But as for a clear-cut opinion on that I don't know. I don't really know.
All right. And what was your experience like staying in Coorg? Did that also sort of run your imagination, or were there any real life experiences? You have spoken about how your grandfather also played a pivotal role in shaping your understanding of the paranormal.
Okay. So it's like this. Where I was born, it's a village. And when I was young, we didn't even have electricity those days. I think the younger generation, Gen Z, will find it difficult to believe that, you didn't. I grew up in a house with no electricity. So when you have no electricity, every night it's a sort of very interesting experience, especially in a house where, in Coog, the homesteads are very isolated. It's not like a neighborhood where people live together and stuff like that. Each house is quite far away from the other house. So after sundown, usually, one could hear a lot of stories about spirits and, my grandfather was a forester, so he had roamed forests of South India quite extensively. So, but he was a complete atheist. I mean, he never believed in spirits and stuff. So, but he also recounted many odd experiences to me.
Okay.
Yeah. So whether it was paranormal or his imagination going wild, etc., I couldn't. So these sort of thoughts shaped my early childhood. So I got interested in this genre.
What is that fine line that divides or separates superstition from the supernatural?
I think superstition is not a good thing. Superstition is not a good thing. Supernatural basically should come out of a sense of wonderment. It's not just supernatural, entity or spirit and stuff like that. In this universe, we still don't understand
True.
quite a bit. Even after so much advancement of science, technology, there are certain things we don't fully comprehend. So that may be supernatural, but I'm rather against, superstitious beliefs which comes out of habit and, which sort of curtails your personality development.
Well said.
But a wonderment about the supernatural possibilities in a universe, I think it's a good thought, so it can expand your horizons.
My last is, give me 3 reasons why we all should go and buy Whispers in the Shadows.
Well, I think it's different. It's written in a very simple style and it's an honest account. So I hope your viewers will take time out and try to read this book. It's available in Amazon.
I don't know about the viewers, but
Yeah.
I am a fan of the horror genre. So
Okay.
I'm certainly getting my hands on this one.
Sure.
Thank you, Mr. Ganapathy, for giving us your time. It was a pleasure having you here on CNN News 18. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. It was a pleasure.